not, it's hello for the second time. It's a long story. I'll fill you in tomorrow if you're joining us for After Hours.
First time nobody heard you.
First time nobody heard me at all. YouTube, yet again, having a moment, but never mind. We need to get going with this.
Yay.
So, hello, welcome. I was broadcasting. Sadly, to the wrong page. Thank you for that, YouTube. We'll talk about that at the end. Let's get on with it right now. So, you should be able to see the poster at the moment. But I am going to make it so you can see my desktop and we can get on with the demo. So let's pass that across. Blue desktop. Hang on, what are you doing? You're doing weird things with me, don't do that. Right. And finally, it's one of those nights. Nothing's working right. But we like being live, don't we?
We do.
Yes, remind me.
You're getting lots of hellos.
Hello, everybody. I can see the chat, but only marginally. And I'm about to not be able to see the chat at all because I'm going into there. But if you are with us, hello, and we will chat later at the end. Right, so officially hello and welcome. Not bad, that. Couple of minutes. Just saying. Right, we are broadcasting in HD, 720 HD. So first job, make sure that the cog on the right-hand side is saying 720. Otherwise, it will be very, very blurry. While you're down there configuring that, give us a like. It always makes a difference in YouTube. But tonight, we are going to be looking at how to create a newsletter in Affinity Publisher. Now, first job, because this is the first thing anybody says to me, is it Windows or is it Mac? You're on a Mac. I'm using a Mac. Yes, there are some differences, but there are far more things that are absolutely identical. I will point out any major differences as I go, but to be honest, the only one that comes to mind is the colour options, and they are related to the specific OS you're using. But the major differences there, I'm not going to touch tonight. So I would say absolutely everything that you see will be identical on either platform. Right, first thing to think about when you are making a newsletter is to flat plan it. If you were with me on my previous live show, which only ended 20 minutes ago, I was making a slide. That's the slide. Now, flat planning is, there's no magic behind it. It can be as basic or as advanced as you like, but the purpose of flat planning is to make sure that the content of your newsletter or your magazine or anything else that you're doing with it, you have an overall view. So like a bird's eye view of the content. So what we're looking at there is just something that I could print out on an A3 piece of paper and start drawing on. Now, I tend to do it in pencil, unless there's anything that's set in stone, in which case that can go in a certain colour or in a pen. But what it's showing you is my newsletter is intended to have 28 pages. It's going to start on the right-hand side, hence the cross next to page 1. And it's going to finish with a back cover, page 28, hence the cross where 29 would be. So that indicates you've got your front cover and your back cover, and then the rest of that is content pages. And what you would tend to do with it is, let's say you need something for a centre spread, then that would be pages 14 and 15. It's right in the middle. You may also want to place adverts, or you may have standard content that you put in your newsletter. So things like a contact block or a social block, or maybe a quiz page or something like that. And the idea of the flat plan is put all of that content in first. Otherwise, you might think, people have paid for an advert and I've now got nowhere to put it because I've got too much content, or I haven't put the quiz answers in, and that will come back and bite you when people say I've done the crossword and I'm stuck and I can't get that answer. So put all of that content on your flat plan first, and what space is left, that's what you've got to work with and fill with content. So I just thought I'd mention that up front before we get going any further. That's how I would approach it. And I actually, although there are many digital options for this, I just use a piece of paper. There's two ways that I flat plan. One would be an A3 piece of paper with that printed on it, with loads of squiggling all over it. And the other way is if I've got something that I need to be more tactile with, generally speaking, 12 pages or less, what I would then do is actually print it out. So or I could even use blank paper. So before today, I've taken like some sheets of printer paper. Most of my stuff tends to be A5, fold them in half, staple them, and then I write the page numbers on and I start drawing on it. So one is just a flat sheet of paper. The other is a very tactile, but very, very rough mock-up of it. So I thought I'd mention that before we actually got going. But without further ado, let's head off and actually look at Affinity Designer and how to design your newsletter. Right, so go into Affinity Publisher. Oh, I would love to say hello to everybody, but there's so many of you. But hello, everybody. I can just about see the chat now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make that chat a little bit bigger, just in case there's any questions. But Mike is going to tell me if there's any questions and if it makes sense to answer them at that point. Okay, right. So this is Affinity Publisher. You may or may not see a welcome screen when you go into it. If you don't and you would like to, you will find that from the help welcome. So you may see that every time you log in. I don't. But it's actually a good idea every few weeks to go and have a look, because it shows you new tutorials and sometimes there's free downloads as well. So it is always a good idea to have a look at that, as I say, once in a while. But for the moment, we don't need it. Go on, go away. Right, so I'm going to start completely from scratch. I do have some sample files I might refer to, but you're probably going to be starting from File, New. So let's start there. Now, this is the new dialog box that came in a few months ago now when they introduced templates. So the first thing to think about is, are you starting with a preset or are you starting with a template? Presets have no content, but they do have, here on the right hand side, they have lots of settings that can be pre-configured. Templates, on the other hand, do have content. As you see, I've got lots here, haven't I? Not a one. I haven't created one yet, but I will do. So we're going to start with presets, but even within a preset, you drill down then across the top, you can have your own presets, which I do have. So these aren't templates that have content, but they are pre-configured to be perfect for when I send something to print. So they're my custom presets. You won't have those, but you will have print. You'll have print ready, photo, web, devices, and architectural. And which one you would choose would depend on your output. So as well as thinking about your flat plan, you need to be thinking, is this for printing or do you actually need it press ready? And you should be told by whoever is requesting the file, or by your knowledge of where the file is to go for printing and things, you would hopefully have some idea. I'm working on the principle here that I need to address two ways of creating output, both in terms for print and for PDF. So some people will be thinking, oh, I only need a PDF. Other people will be thinking, if we design it for a PDF, it'll never work if I print it. So what we need to be thinking about is it possible to make one file that would actually work for both? And yes, it is. So I'm actually going to choose print, but I'm going to pre-configure it slightly differently. So the first thing when I choose print is to choose a size for the pages. And we've got A0 all the way, there's all sorts in here. 12-inch vinyl covers and business cards and things like that. So there's lots of different sizes. When I design my newsletters, they tend to be A5. And that's because if I want to print them out, I can print them out onto an A4 piece of paper and fold it up. If I send it for print, then yes, I will get an A5 brochure back. You might, the two most common sizes are A4 and A5. I'm going to go with A5 just because that's what I normally do, but the principle is exactly the same. Now, if you've pre-configured this already, if you've been in and you've already done it once, you may find that everything that's in the layout and the pages and the colour is absolutely perfect. On the other hand, it might not be. So I'll take it from the top with the layout. The page width is 148mm, the height is 210, and I've set it to 300 dpi. In the DPI, you can take that up to 400 if you want to. It's just that this default happens to be 300. So I'm going to try and make as few changes here as possible. And can I get it back to 300? No. So I'll type it in. Right, now we're back where we were. You'll have noticed that even though I turn that back to 300, at the top it now says custom. Before it said A5. If that's a problem for you, just click away and click back on A5 and there it is. Right, the next option is your document units. Now I do work in millimetres, but you have a whole range of things. And just to point out that every single thing that you create in here, you know what else I've done, don't you, Mike? I haven't got the local recording going. Oh no, this is because YouTube is in a really bad mood with me. I will sort that problem out. Give me 1 second. Just in case YouTube has a moment overnight, which, you know, I wouldn't be surprised about. Not the way tonight's gone. So let me just set that to that and get it on the Mac and then we're good to go. So if there is a problem, I will have a local recording. Don't you love it when YouTube has a moment and my plans go completely awry? Never mind. Right, everything that I'm setting here, if you set it and then you get into your document and you do 3 days work on it and you think, oh, I made a mistake. Everything that's in here you can change later. It's just that at this point you can set it all at once, but everything can be changed. So I'm leaving it at millimetres and I'm leaving the orientation to portrait. Then you've got a decision to make. This is probably your first big decision, which is when you place images in your file, do you want them linked or do you want them embedded? And the default for the overall app is usually linked, but I've changed it to embedded. Now, the difference between the two is linked means it will refer back to the location that the images or it's image placement. So your images were on the hard drive at the point you added them to Publisher. Your problem with doing that is if you move them, the links will break. If you send it to print and you don't send the images, the links will break. And everything will then be very poor quality. You'll be able to open it up and you'll be able to sort of see a very, very rough version of the images. But it will be very, very rough. So I always choose embedded. It makes it easier for me. The downside of embedded is your file size will be much bigger. So it's a trade-off between the two. But as I've said, even that option can be changed later. Then you've got the number of pages. And at this stage, you might not know the number of pages. But if you flat planned, and you do, then you can set that in here. I'll leave it to the default of 8 at the moment. Then you've got this next option, which is to have a default master page. And what that's talking about is whether you have a master page that you can put content on that will ripple through to all of the other pages. I'm going to leave that set to yes because I'm trying to leave this as near the default as humanly possible. Right, the next option, so we finish with the layout at that point. The next option is whether you have facing pages or not. Now, facing pages refers to the layout that you will see in this area over here.
Kim wants to know how to make embedded the default.
Well, when you go into here, let's go back where we can see it at the top. Right, if it was set to linked like that, then all I would need to do is change it to embedded, and this up here says custom. So it's no longer this A5, it's now custom. And next to that there is a plus button, and you can add a new preset. So when you've finished making all of the changes, including the fact that you want your images embedded, all you need to do is hit on the plus there, and it gives you a new preset, which goes into your presets, the My Presets section. At the moment, it's called Untitled, Unnamed one, which is not helpful, is it? I do believe you changed that in there, so rename it, and that would be something like Embedded Images. And now, instead of going back to the print to do it, you know, you've already configured one for you, and all you would need to do is double click there. Right, but we'll get back here and we'll get back into 5 because I hadn't made any changes. I was talking about default master and leaving that alone. Then there's the facing pages option, which if you're doing a PDF, you might think, not going to need a facing pages option. But there is a reason to actually maybe leave that set to it. But it doesn't matter, you can change it later. I'm going to leave it set to facing pages because I've found it's easier for me working with it to imagine it as a booklet in front of me and have that look to it. Otherwise, I'm looking at it and thinking which page goes next to which. So I do leave that turned on. Then you've got two options to arrange it, horizontal and vertical, but I'm going to leave it at horizontal. And I want the document to start on the right hand side, which is the same as the flat plan, if you recall. I put a cross through the left hand side of that first double spread. So I want it to start on the right. Next thing to think about, colour. Now, if you're sending this for print, then you are probably going to want it to be CMYK. I'm primarily creating a PDF here, but, and again, this can all be changed later. If it's a PDF, RGB is fine. If it's going to print, CMYK is probably better. You go to CMYK, you've then got all of these options here. And the one we use, I always forget the number, but it's coated Fogra. I think it's 39. So you need to choose two things. You need to choose your colour format and then a colour profile. But as I say, all of this can be changed later. And if you literally have no idea what you should be setting that to, and you'll know maybe at the point of print that they'll tell you, then leave it either at CMYK and one of the coated Fogras, which is fairly common, or just leave it at RGB and change it later. It really doesn't make that much difference because you can go in and change it at a later date. Some of mine actually already have that set. So if we go to my presets and we look at an A5 one, you can see it's CMYK, and at the moment it's got a generic profile. At the second I print, I'll choose in there one of the Fogras. I'll speak to the printer, explain what it is that I'm after, and they will give me best advice on what I should set it to. So, and I've actually had stuff printed that way and it looks absolutely fine. So I'm going to leave that set to RGB. Our output today is going to be a PDF, but I will show you how to make a PDF which doesn't have bleed and printer's marks on it and everything else, but you could very easily convert it for print if you wanted to. So we finished with colour. We're now on to margins. Margins are within your page. What kind of gap do you want between your contents and the edge of your page? And because I'm only doing it at A5, I change it to 10 millimeters. But looking at that, I would need to put it in every box, but not if you use the link there when you type something in. So if I was to type 5, it changes them all. So I want mine at 10. And the last thing to think about is the bleed. And again, this is one of those things where particularly if you are doing a PDF, you might think, do I need a bleed? Do I not need a bleed? How does bleed work? What do I do with it? It's an extra area of your document that you place content in that you don't actually intend to be printed. But if the printer is 0.5 millimeter off, it will actually print something rather than a white line. So the standard that I've been using for a bleed is 3 millimeters all the way around. And that's it. We've done the last one. So we've been through the layout, the pages, the colour and the margins. I did make a couple of changes there to that one. So if this is going to be my standard now, and I've just used my mouse wheel on that and it sent it strange. So be careful when you're doing it. And let's open up the bleed, make sure everything is right. At that point, that's probably when I would create a custom setup, and this one would probably make sense to call it A5 with bleed and 10 mil margin, and then I know exactly what it is. So all of the settings I've configured over here are now in there, and it actually says at the top you can't see all of the name. Why is that in the middle? Why don't they pull that back over here? Plus the fact, why is that in the actual layout? It could be nice in a bit of its own, and then I would be able to see it. But all you need to do to actually create the file is then hit create, and that gives you this. I'm going to take you through this, but then I'm going to do it again and show you a difference. I'm assuming at this stage you have got some idea about the interface of Affinity Publisher, but I'll just, in case you haven't, show you that your master pages, because we said make one master page, is actually up here. And then you've got your content pages. That's your first page that we said we wanted it to start on the right. And then you've got pages 2 and 3 together. You've got 4 and 5 together, 6 and 7, and 8 is your back cover down there. So when I said about it visualising better, there'd be nothing to stop you displaying all of these pages individually. You could actually set it up like that, where it doesn't have facing pages. So in our document up here, this is where you would make some of those changes to the things we've already set up. If I didn't want facing pages, I could do that, and my pages would then look like this. The reason I find that difficult is I'm designing it at A5, and pages 2 and 3 are going to be next to each other. And if I do that in here, there's page 2, there's page 3, and I can't visualise them next to each other. That's why I do put in facing pages. It just makes more sense to me that now I can see pages, that's 6 and 7 and 2 and 3. Right, other things to think about in here. I've shown you where the masters are, shown you where the pages are. All of the panels I work with, I will indicate which panels they are. If I don't actually say this is this panel and you can't find it, you need to go into View and Studio, where you will find all of your panels, all of them. Now, that's what it looks like if you have a master page. And the reason that you would be having a master page, and I'm just going to close that one down because it's got all upset with its little self. So let's do new, same one again, exactly the same. You've got this master, you've got one master, and that is your master. A master page means that when you put something on it, so I'll put a grey stripe right along the top, which I will then change from grey, because grey is very boring, isn't it? So let's go into the apple colours. Oh, we'll make it red so we'll see it. And what happens is anything on the master page that is applied to the pages, you will see a stripe along the top. So that's what it means with a master page. You put the content on one page, the master page, and it ripples through to all of the pages that that master page is applied to. Now, there was an alternative, wasn't there? When we were in the file new, and we went to print and we went to A5, one of the options was default master, yes or no. And there is a tick in yes. So I'm going to take that tick out, because if you try this and you say she said there was a master page and it's not there, maybe it was because there wasn't a tick in that box. And what that looks like is, yes, you get all the pages exactly the same, but no master page at all. Now, if you've done that and then think that master page would have been a really good idea, then all you actually need to do is up here on the master page, there is a button to add a master. It gives you a default name of Master A. You get to design it as either single or facing, and it's obviously got the same size, etc. And you can set the margins for it. So one thing I would want to do in there is make sure that that was set to 10. You'll notice in there, for no reason whatsoever, there's no little chain at the side to link them. Don't know why. Would make sense, but there you go. So we now have a master. But is that master applied to any of these pages? So we're on the master. Let's say we want to put that block on again, and we don't particularly want it grey. Let's go for yellow this time. All right. And you can see it's on the master, but no, it's not on any of the pages. And it's not on any of the pages because this master hasn't been applied to any of the pages. Quickest way to rectify that, drag and drop it. You drag and drop master A onto the pages, and then all of the content of that master page is applied to the pages. So that was just to show you, if you don't have any masters, that's what you need to do to fix it. So what I'm going to do now is get back to exactly where we were with our file and new, and I think we had a preset there, and that's the one I'm going for. You'll notice this is very strange. I've saved a preset. As far as I'm concerned, if I save a preset, and that was the preset, it did have a default master, but when you take the tick out, it doesn't put it back in. So make sure if you want that default master, it's in there. Right, this is what we're going to be using tonight. First thing I need to do is to show you the white area is your page. In fact, let's start on the inside. This blue area that's just outside that red square, that's your margin at 10 millimeters in. The next area of interest is this one, which is the edge of where the white area finishes. That's the edge of your page. So that is the edge of your A5 page. But if we zoom in, we've got there, so from the edge of your page to there is your margin, but you've also got this area, this black area. That is the bleed. So if I wanted, for example, to put a page number, and I wanted my page number on a block. Now, I'm not doing this correctly at the moment, but I'll do it correctly later. So we want to see that we've got page 1 there. But I want to put it on a coloured square. So I put a square in there and then put that in what I consider to be the right place, which is the edge of my page, and move it back so I can see the number. So I put my number in the middle. Perfect. Thing is, if that were to print and the print was slightly off, you might end up with white here. And of course, if what you'd actually done with that was make the text white and the background black, you would end up with that effect if the printer's slightly off, which is not what you want. That's where a bleed comes into play. You need to bleed the content off the page into what is, in essence, a safe area, a print safe area. If the printer's fractionally off, it will still look okay. So what you actually do is bleed that into the bleed area. You are hoping that the 3 millimeters will not be printed, but if it's needed, it will be there and it will save a catastrophe of gigantic proportions if you're having 5,000 printed. So the bleed area is there to put content into in terms of helping a printer out if the printer's misaligned fractionally. So that's what we're actually going to be working with. Right, next thing to think about then. We are at the point, gone through all of the dialog box options, that we need to put some content on there, don't we? So this is where you would refer to your flat plan. Now, normally when people demonstrate things like Affinity Publisher, you start off by putting some text in, and then 3 hours later they say, and the styles. I think you need to understand about styles before we even get going. You also need to think about layout, and you need to think about masters at the beginning, because if you left it till the end, you'd have to undo half that you've already done. So we'll start by actually looking at masters and think, well, what sort of masters do we want?
Anthony asks, is 3 millimeters a standard?
It tends to be, yes, Anthony. All the printers that I've worked with, and I have been printing A5 brochures and business cards, and every time I've looked at the printer's instructions and it's always been 3 millimeters. So I tend to leave it at that. It may well be more than 3 millimeters the bigger the actual printed product. So if you've got like an A0 thing that you're printing, the printer's going to be bigger, and maybe 3 millimeters for a bleed wouldn't be quite enough. But whoever is doing the printing for you, they will instruct you on the colour and the profile and the bleed that they want, whether they want printer's marks or not. I actually have a file that I did send for print, and it isn't a publisher file. Publisher hadn't been, it wasn't even out in beta. And I had to put all of the bleed on manually and all of the printer's marks on manually, which meant when I made the PDF, I couldn't get rid of them. But in Affinity Publisher, you can. So whether the bleed is 3 millimeters or 30 millimeters, the PDF will look okay. It will just depend on what your printer tells you. Usually, if you're going for somebody who's printing on the web, there's usually like instructions depending on, in fact, sometimes you can download a template. Having said that, many of the templates seem to be for InDesign. So that's another thing to think about. Right, so content. So I think it's a good idea to think through, hence the flat planning, what you want before you actually start. and think in terms of your pages. So one of my masters, I'm definitely going to need a page numbers. I'm going to want page numbers somewhere on my newsletter. So this is the first thing to think about. Generally speaking, where do you want them? And the obvious place to put them, probably down the bottom, either in the middle of the layout or to the side. So I'll put them to the side, but I'm going to do something slightly different. Well, let's have a think about it. I'll put them in the middle. So let me go and get that to do first. So I'll put a text box in, which is going to be about there. I'll sort all of this out later, but at the moment I've got my text box. And obviously I don't want to type the page numbers in. That way madness lies. If you go up to text and you go down to, is it text or document? No, it's text. And we go into fields. Where's my fields? Insert fields, page number. This will automatically update when you apply. So when you apply this master to the pages, it will update. So you've got the page number, you've got the next frame page number, previous total pages. So you can, from these, make all kinds of automated headers or footers is what you would probably refer to them as in Word, but blocks of information in here. I'm only interested in a page number, so I'm going to put that in there. And as you can see, it comes in as a hash. But once this is applied, that will be updated to the page number. So where it is at the moment, not the best layout I've ever seen, because if my content is within the margin area, we don't want the page number sitting over the top of that. We also probably don't want it anything like that size. Now, what I tend to do, you might be tempted to do this and make it really small, and that way you can line it up and it will like go to the middle like that. But again, that way madness lies, because when you get to page 100, you're going to have problems with it being cut off. So actually, if you wanted it in the middle of your content, you could do that and then make it center aligned, and then it's in the middle. And even if you get to page 3000, it's going to display correctly. Now, what I do probably want is to have it much smaller than that. So maybe even down to like 7 points. And I might want that centered vertically as well, so within the box. I might also want it a different colour, so we could do that while we're here. Probably palish grey, possibly not that pale though. So maybe a grey of about 60%. Okay, so we've now got a page number. But we've only at this stage put that page number on one side. So although you can't see it too well at the moment, if we go into page 2, we have a page number. But across on page 3, no page number. So we need to go back to the master, and easiest way is just to hold the Option key down or Alt on PC and drag it over to the other side. And you get the red lines to indicate it's aligned horizontally, green lines for vertical, and you are done. When you now go back to page 3, you have page numbers. And they're there on page 1 as well. Kim says she's been adding page numbers, incorrect. Well, you'll be correct with them now. Right, okay, so we've got our first master at the minute called Master A. Not the best for that, to be honest, as it would be to call it that. But you're going to take me to that? Where's my rename? Oh, you're up here, aren't you? No, you're not. I'll worry about that in a minute. So the next thing I need to do is think, well, page numbers look great, but it's all looking a bit plain, isn't it? And I've got no help in terms of laying out the content either. So I'm going to think in terms of what masters would help me with that. And I think it would look good if I could have, in this case, let's say the Mac Bytes orange. So I'd like a strip across the top that's the Mac Bytes orange. Now I know at the moment I am still on this master, which is not actually where I want to be. I'm going to take that off. I'm just going to show you this on a particular page. And I want the Mac Bytes orange, so I'll get the Mac Bytes colour palette and apply the Mac Bytes orange. Obviously at the moment it's only on a page, but I'm doing this for layout, so I don't really want it touching the top, so 6 or 7 millimeters should do. There we go. Now, at this point, it's on a page and we need it on a master. Do we put it on master A? That's the question. And the answer very much depends on how the rest of your flat plan turned out in terms of what you want each page to look like. If every page is absolutely identical, you want the strip across the bottom and you want the page numbers at strip across the top, page numbers at the bottom, then yes, put it on master A. But what if some don't have that? Then you need to start mixing and matching with your masters. So I'm going to pretend over here as I create another master that this one is going to be the design master. So I'm going to call it design. And everything's the same as the other one. So all of the dimensions are the same, the margins are the same, but this is where I'm going to put my design. So from pages 2 and 3, and I'm showing you this because you may well not have been using masters up to now, and you might need to do what I'm about to do, which is take content from a page and put it on a master. But before we go any further, anybody spotted the problem with this at the top? If you're with me live, let me know in the chat. There isn't a problem particularly. It would look fine on a PDF. But remember that we had that bleed area. Well, this bit at the top, you know, we don't want that printer problem where it's slightly off and we get a white line. So you could do with stretching it out into the bleed area. So I'll do that in here and then... So just stretch that out like that. And you do get, again, the green and the red to indicate that it's actually in the right place, touching the right bit. Then I'm going to cut that from pages 2 and 3 and put it where it needs to be on the design master. So just paste it in there. Now at this stage, we've got this as the design and we have master A that's got the page numbers on it. So it would make sense to apply that to here, but at the minute that's got page numbers on it. So if I did what I did before, which was drag and drop that, then the page numbers disappear. Now, that's a bit of a problem, isn't it? But you can fix that problem. All right, so what I'm going to do with this one, so we're looking at this one at the moment, and to make it even clearer, because the page numbers are pretty light at the minute, I'm going to go back to design and I'm going to put something else at the bottom of here, and this will really show you how your masters, multiple masters and your pages all interact together. This time I'm going to make that black, so the fill is actually black. Right, so I've got that applied to this page. And if I dragged and dropped it and applied it to another page, I would have it applied on there. But both times that took away the page numbers. But if I were to right click, oh, and if you click on the left, you select the left page. If you click on the right, you select the right. Click in the middle, you select the pair of them. If you right click on it and you say apply master, you get to choose the master that you apply. So obviously at the moment, master A. I'd like to apply the design master to this, obviously. But that's already applied, isn't it? It's already applied. So it does make sense to choose the one with the page numbers on. But if I were to do that and not change anything, come on, that should definitely have made a difference. Come on. Apply master. Replacing 2 and 3, that's right. Did it actually update then? I think it did. I think it finally updated. There we go. So it's replaced the master. So I've lost this. Right, this is what you actually need to do. Right click, apply master. You do want master A applied, which is the one with the page numbers, but that's already applied. So I actually want the design applying. This time, take the tick out of replace existing. And what will now happen is you will have 2 masters applied to the same page. This may or may not end up well, because it's going to depend, isn't it, on the order that they were actually applied in. How on earth do we know that? Because I can't see the page numbers. If we go to the layers, which is way wide, We can see we've got design applied. We don't have the other one applied. What is going on here? Come on. Apply master, master A. Let's apply it to all pages. No. I don't want to replace the existing, and you've got the design on it, so just apply it. Why are you not applying it? Don't you love it when it works in rehearsals? Am I looking at the right page? 2 and 3. There we go. No, I'm not. I'm not looking at the right page. I've scrolled. Silly me. Right, I'm going to double click, make sure I'm there. You can actually just see the page number. So you've got 2 masters applied, but the placement's off and the colour's shocking. But we can go back into master A up here and we can move that down a bit. So it's probably down about there. And also change the colour of that to white. In fact, let's get rid of that and make it white. Okay. Easiest thing to do at this point, lose that one, do it like we did before, copy it across. Let's get that so we can see it, and then line it up with the other one like that. Now, when we go back in here, we can see, and I'm going to take everything away so you can see it perfectly, we've got 2 masters applied. We've got the orange and black design, and we've got the page numbers across the bottom in white, sitting on top of the other master. That's one way to do multiple masters. Now, this isn't a masterclass on masters, so I'm going to leave it at that point. But there are other things that you can do with masters. But at least we've got 2 applied at that point. And if you wanted the other pages to be the same, then you would do the same with the other pages. I'm going to do that and then show you there's a bit of an issue. So in here, when we go to apply master, it says specific pages and it's saying 3. But I want this to apply to them all, and I don't want the existing changed. So I'm going to apply it, and that should mean when we go here we've got pages 4 and 5. This one we don't, but we said apply to all, didn't we? We did, but this one didn't have the other master already applied. So you have to be very careful when you're thinking about doing this. It would be very easy to go down a rabbit hole and get incredibly lost. So this one's got master A. I would then need to apply that one, and again, don't replace the existing. But now something else is wrong. What's going on? Now I've got no page numbers, but they are both applied. What's happening? And it's all to do with the order that you have them applied. If we put the design behind the page numbers, problem solved. In fact, we seem to have that on twice, don't we? There we go. So these, if they're in the wrong order, are going to give you a problem. So you make sure in the layers they're in the right order, and then you don't have a problem. So pages at this point, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 have all got the design and they've all got the pages, and that leaves us the back cover with nothing and the front cover with nothing, which is probably right. Now, should you have a master for the front cover? Depends on the content of the cover. If there's ever anything that's repeating, then it's probably a good idea. So I'm going to quickly create one here, and I'm going to call it cover. It really does only need to be single rather than facing, because it's only ever going to be on that side, but it doesn't matter. So if you've already done it and it looks like that, not a problem. I will put some content on this, but I'm going to import and export to do the content. So is there anything else I can do before we do that? Yes, there is. These pages are all very well as far as they go. Probably my design I might want to think about. But what about layout? What about number of columns and things like that? Well, let's do a 2-column layout while we're at it. So 2 columns. Everything else is the same, but I'm just going to put 2 columns in it. And how do I do that? You've got a couple of options when it comes to this. You can either... where on earth? Let's have a look. Yeah, that's fine. No, it's right. It's right. It's right. Right. First way to do it, if you're going to put long stories in, you may want the text to flow from page to page to page. That's more relevant for a book than a newsletter. But that would be one way to do it. But there's a more visual way of doing it. So I'll do that on one side just to show you. I will draw out a text box here, which should be working well and isn't particularly. Let me go to view. I want to see my margins, so I can draw this to fit the margins. So don't do as I've done there where it's slightly off. Make sure that you move it and size it so it fits perfectly into your margins, like that. That's a text frame. Is that lined up properly? Yeah, I think so. I think so. That's your text frame, and it's on your master, and it will ripple through to all of your content pages. But at the moment, if you were to type in it, everything would go into one column. You do, however, have the option from the menu to choose the number of columns. So you can take this up as much as you want. But this one was going to be 2 columns, wasn't it? And the only other thing to specify in here is the gutter, which is the gap between them. You're going to have text in this block, text in the block here, but in the middle, that's going to be a gap. So what size do you want the gap? And that's controlled with the control next to the number of columns, and I'm going to take that down to 5mm. Possibly 6, actually. A little bit tight, isn't it? And you can make sure that that's in the right space. Once you've got it all perfect, you can then again option or alt and drag, and you've got that on the other page. So we've got 2 column layout there on that page. Obviously, incredibly simple to do a 3 column layout. In fact, it would be easier to duplicate that master, which is this one. Where on earth is the rename here? Is it spread properties? There we go. So let's make that 3 columns. Obviously at the minute it isn't, but on here you just need to go back and add an extra column. It's that simple. Click on the other one, add an extra column. And what you're doing at this stage, it's not actually putting the content in the newsletter. And I know if you're frantically trying to get an issue out, that's not the time to play around like this. The time to play around like this is at the flat planning stage and the planning stage, and then put the content in later. But we've got a 2 column layout, we've got a 3 column layout. What other kinds of layouts could we do? Well, those ways are using the text frames to flow the text through. There are other ways to do this. So I'm going to go into this one, and I'm going to create an image grid. Now, in concept, it's identical to what we were already doing. It's just done in a fractionally different way. But what I'm doing is creating like a sheet of acetate to stick over my content. So it's going to give me the ability to import images and make an entire newsletter really quickly, because I'll have these master pages, and I'll have a master page for every kind of page that I would want. And one of them would be an image grid. Now, an image grid, I could sit here and I could use image placeholders, and I could drag them all out like this forever. And obviously it is a template, so maybe you would want to do that. But there is another option. So I'm going to go into a view, and yes I am, guides manager. Now, your horizontal and vertical guides are when you drag a guide on like that. And when you drag a guide on, they appear in your horizontal guides and your vertical guides. So let's say this one, I'm a little bit off. It should have been 60mm. I can actually type in here too to make it more precise. So if I can't drag very well, I can type in. Now, actually, that's not what we're after doing with it, because I don't want to sit here and make a grid either. What I want to do is to create some column guides. So in terms of columns, I would like 3 columns, and I get a grey background. So each of these is a column guide that I will be able to snap my content to. So I want 3 columns, but I want more rows. And this is what happens when you make more rows. You now get little squares. But the gutter of 8.5 is far too much. I think I took that down to 3. So let's make that 3. I can get away with less on this one. I had 6 on the text, because the images don't really need much of a gap between them. And I think I worked it out. I could squeeze 7 on like that. So it puts it on both sides there. And that is the master that I would use when I want to create a grid of images. So I've basically created quite a few of these already, haven't I? Did I do a cover one? Don't think I did. If you do want one for... Oh, I did do a cover, didn't I? It's in here somewhere. There it is. There's the cover. Right. So now's the point to try and get these masters actually applied. So on the front cover, I can just drag and drop that onto there. This one at the moment doesn't have even the guides to help me out or anything like that. Neither do any of the others, but I am going to say that this back page here, this 6 and 7, my last two content pages, I would like on 6 and 7 to actually put in an image grid. And I know if I drag and drop it, I'm going to lose two things. I'm going to lose the design and I'm going to lose the page numbers. So again, I need to go to Apply Master, and this time I want to apply the image grid. And again, I don't want to replace the existing. I want it as well as. Come on, you can do it. There's the image grid. Why are you not showing? We got everything showing? Well, I think we have. No, we don't want the grid showing, do we? Where's it disappearing to? Ah, come on. What's that page you applied it to, wasn't it? You're going to make me out to be a liar. Don't do that. No, the image grid is there and I can see it. And it's saying it's applied. I'm just not seeing it. Why would I not be seeing it? In fact, that's very strange because I haven't got anything to open it out on to here either. And needless to say, it worked perfectly in rehearsals. There's absolutely no reason that that isn't working apart from the fact it isn't working. So I'm going to do it yet again. What's applied? Right, apply the image grid to 6 and 7. Do not replace. Honestly, come on. Well, like I say, that worked in rehearsals. Okay, so you can see it. I'm just going to drag and drop it on. Might have to do some jiggery-pokery with it. Let's see if it works by dragging and dropping it on. You see, it's quite happy with that. Maybe it can't do that under design. Let's go in and try and do it the other way then. So let's try and apply the numbers. That's our page numbers, which we won't see, will we?
Stephen says the master has two text frames which hide the image grid.
That's not helpful. That is not helpful. I wanted to put that behind. Okay. Maybe I did it differently before. 6 and 7. I want 6 and 7. Come on, 6 and 7. That one's fine. Absolutely fine. And then the last one to do is to apply a master. And this time it is our master A, which is indeed the page numbers. Right, okay, so now they're all in the right order. Everything's fine. Yeah, that's actually right. That is very strange. No, I did it that way before. But anyway, it's in there now. Right, so we're at this stage, we've not actually got the content in, but we've got placeholders for the content now. Right, next thing to think about, front cover. And this is kind of an aside, but relevant. You have the concept of a library in here, where you can have your assets. It's called Assets. If you can't see that, you need to go to View, Studio, and Assets. But it's empty. You can start to populate this manually, but Affinity Designer's been out for years, hasn't it? And Affinity Designer has had assets for all of those years, and I have got my MapBytes assets in Affinity Designer. So if I go to Affinity Designer, that's actually what you've got here is Studio Link. And this does not particularly, well, it gives you everything. Let's see if we can turn it on from in here. No, it's blank. It's using the other assets, isn't it? That would be lovely if that worked, but it doesn't. That's Studio Link, where you can flick between applications to enable you to edit things in a way that Affinity Publisher is unable to do. So, for instance, Affinity Designer would enable you to curve vectors and things, and Affinity Photo would enable you to work on your photos to the nth degree with tools that don't exist in Affinity Publisher. But for what I want, I'm actually going to have to open Affinity Designer so I can actually get to the assets that I'm looking for. So I don't need a document in Affinity Designer, and you don't need Affinity Designer to do this. If you haven't got Affinity Designer, then you won't be about to do what I'm about to do. But these are my MacBytes assets. So if I go up here, I can export those assets. And when I export them, it will create a file, an AF asset file. So I'll just put it on here. I will call it MacBytes. Oh, I'd love to call it MacBytes, only it's going into the cloud. Right, no. We want it on the desktop where we can see it. Right, MacBytes. And put it on the desktop. So all I've done is actually export everything that's in there. Affinity Designer does come with some defaults. So you've got like iOS 12 assets and all kinds of things in here to play with. I've just created my own for MacBytes, and they were just done by creating the assets and dragging them into there. At that point, I can lose Affinity Designer. I want to bring in my assets into Affinity Publisher. And it's the same file format. So just hit Import Assets, and it will be on the desktop, as you see, AF Assets. Select the one you want to import and open it. Now, that means I've got some stuff that I could actually use in here. All of these are Affinity Designer assets, but they will still work perfectly in here. So if I wanted to stick this over there, saying we've got the MacBytes Live coming up, and then just scale it to fit. And because that grid won't print when it prints, so that's what it will look like printing, I can just leave it where it is, that's fine. So your assets is one way to bring assets in. So if we think about that in relation to our page here, which is our cover, make the cover active, drag and drop the MacBytes logo onto it. You obviously need to make it black to see it. And now you've got your masthead put together. So couldn't be easier. Another way to do this is if you've already got the content somewhere else, like Affinity Designer. So maybe somebody has designed your masthead or designed your front cover for you. Wouldn't that be amazing? The other way to do it, which luckily, here's one I had earlier. If I go into Affinity Designer, I do have a front cover that I could use beautifully for this, that was only designed the other day. So what I'm going to do is open up Affinity Designer, and in there open my artwork for MacBytes 130. That's what that looks like. And that one there is just the right ratio for me. That one is perfect. So I'm going to copy that. I'll minimise that just in case we need to go back in. But other than that, paste it in there. It's a little bit bigger than the A5 page. But I can take it down like that and it should fit perfectly. Apart from, of course, it's jumping all over the place, you'd need to think about the bleed on this. So do take it out to the bleed, which I think means that one of the goats is going to lose half of himself. Poor goat. There we go. No, actually, he's just inside, so that was perfect. Oh, that one's going to lose half of himself there. Into the bleed. So you would only expect to see half of that. But there you go. So front cover. Now the thing is, all of this remains editable. So I can just drill through to it. If it's not episode 130, it was going to be 131. It's all editable. So if somebody else has been kind enough to do the artwork for you for your front cover, then you're good to go. You can then carry on adding whatever you would need to add to this to make it like a newsletter. So one of the things you would probably do is add a story to it. So one of the stories. Now that has remembered that we had 3 columns, which is great if you're adding multiple pages, but we don't particularly want it. We just want the one. And what we put in there is something like, read all about, can't even see that, it needs to be bigger. Read all about when it went pear-shaped for Apple. And that's one of the stories that was in the show. Now, obviously, that text, not great for a front cover. Would it work in orange? It might look terrible in the blue. And then, of course, you need to be thinking about styling it. And that is when that fits. Not the best font for it, though. So choose a different font. Something like Couture, which is free. Now, that's got a bit of a... It's a good font, but it's taking up far too much room there. So if we take it across like that and make it a bit smaller, 18 would work. Let's take it out of that cloud. It actually looks all right on the cloud, doesn't it? Or does it? This is what you like when you then start designing. I actually think probably white would look better for that, and then that won't work with the cloud at all, will it? Should we just make it a bit smaller? I don't really want to put it on in black, but I probably need an associated colour. So I'm going to go and grab that red and try that. Oh, that's much better. And the other thing I can actually do with that, get a little bit of space back, is change the gap between it. So I could actually squeeze it up like that. And that would enable me to make it bigger because I've changed the actual gap. So I've put my story on there. So read all about it on the inside, basically. Now, the thing is, at this point, and before we start adding any text, you need to be thinking about what do you want... Do you want to repurpose this for another story? If you do, then you start needing to think about styles. So we'll look at styles. But we've got our front cover at that stage, and we've got everything in here. So on page 2, I need to leave some room. I start to, at this stage, need to leave some room. And I haven't actually, have I, with my pages, applied any of these. So this one, let's say we want to apply the 2 column to it as well. So apply the master, and we want the 2 column master. We don't want to replace the existing, and that comes through with the text. And then I can start putting stories in it. Now, for this one, I probably want to leave the inside for things like a table of contents and the contact me details and all of those. But I do actually want to start putting in some text. I actually do have an entire range of text to put in here. Where did I put that? Text stories, there we go. So one of the ones I've got is a quite long one, and at the moment it's in pages format. If it's in pages format, it will attempt to bring in the styles with it. It will do the same with Word. It would probably be a really good idea for it to be text, plain text. But that's what I've got. And I've made it as plain text as I possibly can. And that's what I'm trying to bring in. So I'm going to copy that from there and just paste that in. So we'll go to here and paste, and there's my story. But obviously it looks shocking. This is where you need to start thinking. Now, I know it's incredibly tempting to look at that and think, I'll start formatting it. But don't. Start looking at it and then make a decision. The first thing you need to think about is your styles. And you need to be thinking, what is the most common format that I would like in my entire newsletter? The one that everything else will ripple out from. And that becomes your base style. So I would say with that, black can be very unforgiving in terms of text. So I'd be looking maybe to change that. But how you do this, go into, and I know these are very difficult to read, we've got layers, we've got paragraphs, we've got text styles, and what's happening is, because the screen's so small for my demonstration, not only is it jumping across so you can see different headings, like you can't see that that's actually paragraph until you hover, it's also jumping up and down, which is, it freaks me out. It does, but I haven't got much room. But what I'll do is I'll drag it out and actually show you the entire panel, because this is going to be your friend. At the moment, the text has no style. Body style is probably where you want it to be, all right? But you probably want to change that fractionally. But before you start making any changes, you need to understand the base style, which is this one. And you'll see the base style is different to the others. You don't particularly, you can edit it by double clicking on it, but you don't particularly apply a base style. So it doesn't apply it. See, if I'm in here and I make that body, then it's body. But I could also do initial words, and I could do a line above or a line below. But you go to base and nothing actually happens. And what I actually want to do to all of this is make it that it's got no style whatsoever. So take it off. Right, although that has left some behind. But it's made the spacing much better. So I would look at this and have a think about it. What is that the most common style for your document? And if it is, then let's go back to the base style and edit the base style. And in here, the base style is the source style for all the other styles that you choose to base on it. And that's why it's called base. So at the moment, it's got lots of information down here. There's lots going on with it. The very first thing is that the font is Arial. So if I go to font over here, I'm going to choose a different font, and I'm going to choose that one, Roboto, whatever. Right, I'm going to choose that one. So that's the font that I would like for the base style. Then come into body and edit the body style. Have a look at that. Right, what is this based on? So go back up to style, and you can see that it's based on the base style, but it's also saying the base style plus 12 points. So it's making an exception to the base style. Now, what size was the base style? Let's go in and have a look at that in the font. It was 12 points. That's probably a bit big for this, to be honest. I'd take that down to at least 9 to be readable. So if we go into body now, it will still be saying plus 12. But I want it to be the same as the base style. Now, hopefully you're following along with this. Why would I want it to be the same style as the base style? And that's because if I ever want to change it, I only want to change it once and have all of that ripple through. Any exceptions that you set up in each individual style will override the base style, and therefore any changes you make, you won't be able to automatically ripple through. So in the font size, instead of making it a specific size, if we just change it to no change, then you're saying it's the base style with no changes. So far, so good. This still hasn't got any style on it at the moment. The next thing to think about is what is the colour that you would like it to be. And again, if that can be in the base style, then edit the base style for that. So colour and decoration, at the moment, it's black. I'd like it to be more grey than black. So let's start taking it down a bit. Quite dark, but grey rather than black. When I go into body and I look at this, it's no change. So hopefully that will come through. It's the base and no changes. Okay, so if I now go into my story and I select the whole thing and I apply the body style, the size is much better for the material that I'm working with, for the printed output. And you can see I've got spacing and all kinds of things going on here, which is great. Now I need to start working on this particular body style. But at the same time, there's things going on, which is this would be a heading 1, and this a 2, and this a heading 3. So need to start thinking about applying styles. Now, I know it's really tempting to just go in and say, well, yeah, I'll just make that bold. But you'll save yourself a lot of heartache if you use styles. And I appreciate it takes time to set it up at the beginning, but once you've done it, and everything can be updated and changed as you need it. So first of all, this is going to be my heading 1. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'm not actually particularly concerned with what it actually looks like, but we'll try and make it look reasonable, eh? So at the moment, it's Roboto. We could change that. One thing that you need to think about is if you are going to change it, make it, you wouldn't want it. I mean, with it being MacBytes, I could use all of my comic styles. I've got where's my comics? They're under K. Because that makes sense, doesn't it? Here we go. I could use something like this because it's MacBytes, but think about the tone of the publication. And if it's a serious tutorial, which it is, then I'm probably more inclined to use something like No, not that one. I'm probably more inclined to use something like Trajan Pro or Myriad Pro, one or the other. Myriad Pro is the MacBytes font. So if you have Myriad Pro, which I think is a paid for font, but it might be installed on your system, that's probably much better. And I might want to make that a bit bigger. But notice what I've done at this stage. Naughty me. I've just applied. I applied a heading 1, didn't I? But then I changed it. So if I have a heading 1 somewhere else, it's not going to look like this one anymore. Unless I go into the heading and say update it. And my changes will then be written back into heading 1. The top tips, the 7 top tips there, that should be a heading 2. And I might decide that would look much better if it was centred as well. And I'm happy with that. You know, the size is right and everything. I'm all right with that. But again, make sure that you write the changes back and update it. And this one needs to be a heading 3. So I'd probably want that probably the same size, maybe literally just make some kind of change to it. What font do we have on that one? We had that one. I'd probably change that to Myriad. Mindful of not taking all of the night to do this, I'm not going to go through and do every one, but let's just set this to Myriad, because if we don't, we're not going to see that much of a difference, are we? So it's a little bit smaller, and we can make it bold. So that is actually going to be my heading 3. Oh, I don't have a heading 3. That's annoying, isn't it? But you can create your own styles. So I'm going to go in here and make a heading 3. Heading 3. It says it's based on body. So it's basing this on the body style. Does it need to be based on the body style? Well, this is where your chaining of styles comes in. I'd say make a diagram of this. It'll make your life a whole lot easier. For these purposes, it doesn't matter that much. Because if you look at the changes, I've changed the font, I've changed the weight, I've made it bold. It doesn't really matter that much. But there are things that will matter with it. So I'm happy for it to be the same colour. If we go into the fonts, no changes. It's using Myriad. So Myriad is overriding whatever's set at body level. It will always have the right font. But colour-wise, for instance, if I change the colour to red, that would ripple through to here as long as the body style was updated. So those are the kind of things that you actually need to think about. Right, and we'll OK that. So we now have a heading 3, and at that point I can very quickly then go through the document and start marking it up, putting in the headings. I also have these items here, all of which need to be a bulleted list. And you already have some bullet styles. They are there. But what I'm finding with this is the spacing's all a little bit off to me. The spacing's far too much for the type of publication that I've got. So I'm going to go back to base and I'm going to look at the editing of it, and I'm going to look for all of my positions. Where on earth have these gone? They're all over the place in here. It's spacing. Where on earth are you? There we go. Paragraph spacing. So at the moment I've got 12 points after, and that's what's giving me all these empty gaps. I don't think I need more than 6 at all. That doesn't look bad at all at that point. And that's had a knock-on effect. By changing the base style, it's changed the body style and the bullet style. The bullets now look much better. That's actually brought in here another element that I can mark up as a heading 3. And I seem to have a spelling mistake there. That's because it was hyphenated in another document. They brought the hyphens in, which wasn't clever of it, was it? Right, so it's pulling together nicely, and it's all styled correctly. But at the moment, you can see we've got these red things flashing at us. What's the matter with these? Well, the eyeball shows you that you actually have overflowing text. There is more text than it can actually display. So clicking on the eyeball shows you that text underneath. The link there, which is the triangle with the link, when you click on there, you're actually loading in the text to your cursor. And at that point, you could go to another page and you could actually draw out the end of that story like that. So I'll draw that out. It might even take more than that. I think that's at the bottom. Yep, there's still more. So I'm going to click on the thing again, do exactly the same. And I think at that point we've actually got to it. And we need to make a few changes. But what's happening now is it all starts to look a bit hairy scary, doesn't it? Because we've got blue links now. But the blue lines are showing you that the text in this frame, that one there, is continued in that one there. And that line there is showing you that the text in this box continues in that box. And that's all it means. So it's a way for you to follow the flow of the text. So actually, it's incredibly useful. Right, let's get rid of that. So layout-wise, not doing too badly. There is another heading there that should be a heading 3. And there's probably quite a few more. There was 7 tips, wasn't there? So there must be at least 7 of these. There's 7. So I'm just missing 5, which is there. So can you see how having the styles is like opening up a tin of paints? I had a tin of paints when I was a child. You could just open them up and then you could use the colours that were in there. You could switch them out and you could change the colours, but you always had this kit that you could work with, and that's what your textiles are like, a kit that you can work with. There are, however, a couple of images that I need to place, so we're going to look at image placement in a moment. Probably won't place them in here, to be honest, probably place them on the grid. And that bit there, where colours apply, is also a bulleted list. So back to the bulleted list, and there is the bulleted list. Now the reason that this is hovering in midair is because I had it set, or it was set by default, that the alignment would be centred. And obviously when I don't have enough text to fill that, it does look a bit ridiculous when it's like that, which I should be able to fix with top aligning it. So it just aligns all the text to the top and solves that problem. Right, we've actually got some text in there now, and it's flowing on multiple pages. Brilliant. Right, images. Images, next thing to think about. I'm going to bring some images in. I've got some images for this story. And the easiest way to bring images in, although you can drag and drop them, so let me go and find the actual images. What was that one? Yeah, that'll do. That's one of the images. So I will drag and drop that in here. It opens it up separate though, so this is the problem. There are better ways to work with images than actually just opening them as a file in Affinity Publisher. So let's close that and use the place command. So file, place, and you then need to go and actually find the images. So at the moment it's looking at my desktop, and I'd love it if default folder was working. No, I think I put it in here. Come on, did I put it in? Newsletter assets, fabulous, fabulous. Right, it was images. No, that's show art. It was the text stories, and it was in there, and there were the images for it. So I'm just going to choose one at the moment and get this textiles out of the way. And open that, and that loads it in. So if you look at my cursor there, you can actually see. That's interesting. I'm using a system shortcut here so I can zoom in, but when I'm using that shortcut, it gives me a preview of what's actually on there, which is interesting. I have no idea what key is doing that. Is it that one? I think it could be the control key. The key I'm actually trying to use is control and option, which is showing me that. But I'm just showing you the little icon. Forget the image behind it. The little icon. Now, with it loaded, you get the opportunity to click and it will add it. But you also get the opportunity to draw it out so you can have it whatever size you like. So let's say we wanted that quite large like that. Now, it needs to be in this story somewhere. So I'd like it if I could put it there, maybe make it a little bit smaller than that, and kind of have the text flow around it. That'd be good. But at the moment, the text is not flowing around it. If you look down here, we've got bullets behind it and the text is not flowing around it. That's because it's sitting above the text. But if you alter your wrap options, which are available from the button on the toolbar, show text wrapping settings, it opens up this dialog box, which I'm trying to get over there out of the way. At the moment, there's no wrap set, and that's why the text is behind it. You have several options. You could tell it to jump the image, which means there wouldn't be anything right or left of it either. You could make it square, which does work reasonably well. If the image is circular or any other kind of odd shape, you can make it tight to the shape. You can also make it appear inside it. But this square one's pretty good. The only problem with it is when we actually look at it, it's too close to the text. So let's select it again, and at the bottom you can specify a distance from the text. You can do it either independently or together, and I think 3mm is fairly decent. So you've added the image and then changed the text wrap to force the text to work around the image. The beauty of that is, as I look at that, that's not great. It's all right on the left-hand side, but over on the right-hand side, we've got like an orphaned bit of text here and an orphaned bit of text down here, and it's not the best. Now that's actually using the colours in, so it isn't even in the right place. But what we'll do is we'll drag it down, because I can afford to move this image down. Maybe if I put it at the bottom, it would look much better, and it would. So when you place images, I appreciate you may be changing the text in the future, and that would have an unfortunate, well, potentially an unfortunate knock-on effect, but try and place it in such a way that it doesn't damage the text to any great degree. Now,
there's a question in the chat.
I've got a question. Okay, what's that question? I have unfortunately switched on too late. Did I define a baseline grid? No, I didn't for that. No, I didn't. I didn't bother on the basis it's a demonstration that didn't really need it. But no, I didn't. I didn't. Right, so I've got my images in. Now, I showed you the place command. And you might be thinking, yeah, but I've got 7 images. And I do. There are 7 images with that. Doesn't Publisher have a setting that is aligned with basic lines? I believe it does. The baseline grid is up on the contextual toolbar somewhere. My screen is that tiny at the moment. I am potentially losing buttons, but it is up on that, up there. Is it that one? There we go. Show the baseline grid manager. So this is where you would set your baseline grid, and it makes your text line up better. So that one's actually in a good place. My screen, I've taken down from a 27-inch iMac down to something really tiny, 1600 by 900. And I've lost some buttons over on the right-hand side, but luckily that one is placed towards the middle, so I've not lost that one. How would I make the left page 2 columns and the right page 4 columns? Okay, let's do that somewhere. You've got a couple of options for that, to be honest. Let me put 2 pages in here and show you that. So we'll just leave it set to master G. Okay, so I've got a new page, a new master up here. A couple of ways. You can either, it depends whether you want the text grid or not. Let's assume you're looking for layout and you don't want the text grid. At that point, you can go to View and go down to your Guides Manager and set up a column guide on here. So let's say we wanted 2 columns over there. That's actually doing it on both, isn't it? Which is not helpful. Okay. Let's cancel that. Let's do it the other way. Right, so we want on the left, we want 2, was it? And 4 on the right. Put 1 text box there, 1 text box there. Go back to the first one that you want to have 2 and just click 2 columns. Choose the gutter gap that you want. And over on this page, click in the box and then choose 4 columns. And it doesn't matter, you know, obviously that 4 columns on A5, bit tiny, but it would be absolutely fine on A4. So simple as that. Right, where's the page that I've got with the grid on? It was that one. Right, placing 1 image is fine. You know, file place, you've placed an image. But what if you've got lots of images you would like to place? So I have a whole collection of images here, which does actually make sense for me to demonstrate in terms of this is something I would actually do. So what I've got here is a collection of images. And they are the show art from MacBytes. And obviously there's been 130 of them. And if I wanted to create like a newsletter and advertise the shows, at the back, I'd need to put all of these graphics in it, and I'd go mad doing it, wouldn't I? So here's what I would do about that. I would go back up to exactly the same command, File, Place, but this time, when I go find them, and they are in my newsletter assets show art folder, instead of choosing just one, I would actually choose all of them and then click open. And that does something wholly different. Now I have my cursor that's got an arrow and an arrow pointing down and a circle. But over on the left-hand side, I have another panel showing, which is Place Images. And I have all of the images available to place. So I can do this really quickly by drawing them out, and they are snapping to the grid that I created earlier. So to showcase, maybe you've got pictures from an event in a newsletter, couldn't be faster. Instead of playing around and trying to resize them so they all match and then putting them in one by one, don't do that. Just do this. I think there's 12 of them. Goes up to 130. So that was the last show. I've got 2 more now. No, this was the last show. And once you've put the last one in, it flicks you back to the pages and you have all of your images beautifully laid out. You did not have to resize them, rescale them, play around with them in any kind of way. Obviously, if you particularly want to showcase this one as being the last show, nothing whatsoever to stop you making that one much bigger. In fact, if you wanted to do that, you wanted to make a couple of others a bit bigger. So let's put that one in the corner. Move this one down so it snaps to that. Move that one to there and just play around, you know, making whichever ones you want. There is a shortcut key, which is Control and W, which will give you a proper preview as well. So it turns off all the grids and guides and you can actually see what that would look like. So I can see, looking at that, that would probably look better if it was up there so it actually aligned with it. But a very, very, very easy way to work and add multiple images. Right, let's have a look. So we have done layout, we have added masters, we've created some styles, we've added the images, we've worked around the images. So much to do. Let's have a look. A table of contents. A table of contents. Right. Now go back up to this one. I left a gap on this inside page to put kind of a table of contents. What I'm going to do with this, there would be other content on that page as well, so I'm going to try and put it in a separate little block. Just thinking how I wired it up. Let's try it in a separate block first. Let's do that first. If it doesn't like it, we'll change it. Right, obviously it's drawing 4 columns because the last time I used the tool, it was 4 columns. So within here, let me do this. 4 columns. So let's take that down to 2 columns. I've no idea. I don't think this is going to be a big table of contents because I've not got that many headings in it. But a table of contents is going to be generated from your heading styles. So I have a heading 1 style on here and I have a heading 2 style down here. If you don't have any heading styles, if you've formatted the text and it looks fabulous, but it's not a style, then the table of contents won't work properly. So that's another reason to learn to love styles. They will help you out. And once you've got a place to put your table of contents, you go up to text and down to table of contents, and you insert a table of contents. And what that has actually given you in there is the article title, which was a heading 1. Then within the article, there was a heading 2, and I seem to have missed off. Why isn't Scratchpad there? Did we not apply a heading 3 to you? Where's my styles? Let's have a look. No, we didn't. So that's formatted correctly. But you see, it's reporting to be body, whereas I go over to metadata, and that is actually a heading 3. So can you see how easy it is to miss something, that it looks perfect? It looks identical to this one, but the style's not correct. So I'll make that a heading 3, which is there. nothing changes in terms of how it looks at all. But now it's formatted correctly. You'll look over here though and think, yes, but it didn't update. And no, it didn't. But if I click in there and I go back to text, table of contents, and tell it to update the table of contents, it will do that and it will put in the one that was missed. This is why it's so important that you use the right styles. You use styles and the right styles. You might be wondering though, why is that looking the way it's looking? So the fonts that's used in here for all of this. And you'll notice as I'm clicked in it, up here, it's changed. Half my styles are missing. Where did they go? And it's because up here we have it. What it's doing is it's saying, right, a table of content entry at a level 1 is going to look like this. And this is what a 3 is going to look like. So if I'm in here and I click on that, that is a level 3 and that is a level 2 and that is a level 1. And if you want that to look different, so let's just say for whatever the reason, because we're insane, we would like the table of content heading 2 to be red. Then we can right click on it and edit it and go into the colour and in the text fill, choose a red. Yeah, that colour will be nice. There we go. So you actually edit the style of the table of contents rather than the heading style. It doesn't use the heading styles that you've got within the body for the table of contents. It uses its own. Now, how does it decide what to include? And actually something on the screen has totally changed. And you might not even have noticed because you're concentrating on the right hand side. There's an entire panel dedicated to the table of contents and mine appears on the left. And this is where you tell it what you want included. So automatically it's picked heading 1, heading 2 and heading 3. But you might have an extra style that doesn't have the word heading in it. You know, it's called Uncle Fester. You have a style called Uncle Fester. And if you wanted that including in the table of contents, shall we do that? Shall we actually do it, Mike? Should we take a couple of minutes and put Uncle Fester in? Right, let's go down to the Scrivener scratch pad there. What colour do you think Uncle Fester would be? Oh no, we can't see. Well, he does wear black, I'll grant you. But having said that, Mike, seriously, the programme was in black. Right, let's go in here. No, I think he needs to be green.
All black.
Being black and white, it really didn't matter, did it? Right, we've made it green. Right, we'll make it Myriad Pro. So I can make it bold, because we do want Uncle Fester to be bold, don't we? Only I could make a style called Uncle Fester. Right, there we go. So we've got a style. We add the style over here, and I am actually going to call it Uncle Fester with a capital U. Right, and OK. And make sure that that style is applied. So just because I've defined that as being Uncle Fester doesn't mean it's applied. So I go and I apply it. Now it is. But when we go back over here, even if I do the text, table of contents, update table of contents, Uncle Fester does not appear, sadly. Poor Uncle Fester. So I'm going to go back over here to the Uncle Fester style. Actually, no, I don't need to, do I? I can do it from this way. Right, in here, you can see what's included. So if I go down, there's Uncle Fester at the bottom. And in there, let me move this back a bit. Oh, the screen is so tiny I can't see everything. But what I will do is put a tick in the boxes, all right? And automatically Uncle Fester has appeared. There he is. Now, by clicking on it in here, you can then specify what heading level Uncle Fester would be. Because obviously at the moment, it's a heading 1. But that's how you do it. You don't have to have everything called heading 1, 2, 3, 4, right down to 17. If something you would like to appear in the table of contents, but you don't particularly want to have it formatted as a heading, then that's how you do it. You can include whatever you like. Only me, only me. Now, at this point, you need to think about outputting your document, don't you? And the problem that you might have in terms of creating a PDF from this is that I put a bleed on it. We actually have a bleed on these pages. But we'll come and do an export. Right, these are the export options you have. So file export brings up this. One of the limitations at the moment is it's not really intended, Affinity Publisher. At the point the beta came out, it was not intended for digital documents at all, really. It had no concept of links or anything. But it's not intended to create sort of EPUB files at the moment. There is no dedicated EPUB option. But I'm going to go for a PDF. Now, at this point, when I'm creating my PDF, you do need to think in terms of what output you want. This is the default. So in here, it's saying PDF for print. You can have presets, and you can see I've got Elaine's print preset, which was a demo. And I've got my Printed Easy crop marks. I've got my Printed Easy Fogra. It was 39. And I've got what I sent to Manchester United for printing for the Munich Memorial. So there's lots of options in here, but the default one it goes for is print. Now, if I just left it like that and exported it, have a think while I do it about what you would expect to get. So we'll put the MacBites newsletter. What would you expect this to look like? I've also just realised I've not saved this. MacBites newsletter before it crashes, which it did just before showtime. Right, that looks okay, doesn't it? If I, preview that, not bad at all, right? Cover's great. So let's open it up and have a look what we get. And then pick holes in it. Cover's absolutely fine, looks brilliant. But when I come to the first pages, I've got a spread. I don't have separate pages. Now, it may be that that's what you want, particularly if you've put things across two spreads, 2 pages. So you may have something here, and you may have like a huge graphic in the middle there, like a skew, and you would like them to see both halves of that graphic. But many, many times, with it being a newsletter, each discrete page is fine by itself. It's absolutely fine. So you might want this to all look like page 1. And when we very first started this, if you remember, I said you've got options to have facing pages or non-facing pages, but I did say it didn't really matter what you chose because you can change it all at the point that you create your final output. And this is what I mean by that. So let's go back into Publisher and create a completely different PDF from this. So File Export again. And this time, where it says all spreads, I'm going to say all pages. The difference between them, all spreads will give you a spread of pages 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. But if you choose all pages instead, you will get 1 page per page, which would work better for reading on a mobile device. That's the only change I'm going to make. So I'm going to export that one. But I am going to put at the end that that was pages. So I exported it with pages. And there it is. Let's open up that one. And now each page is a page. So let's get that set to fit. There's the second page with the index, table of contents, and every page has its own page. And you'll notice there's no bleed on it and there's no printer's marks on it or anything else either, because I didn't specify that at the point that I exported it. If I do want that, then let's go back and do it again. So File Export. If I was sending this off for print, I think I put printer's marks on the United one, but it was 400 dpi. I did include the bleed. I did include all the spreads. If you go to More, you'll get all of the fancy options. And you'll see in here, I've said include printer's marks, include crop marks, registration marks. I mean, we can also include colour bars and page information if you want, and then export it. And you'll get a completely different file. So that was using that preset. So let's go and have a look at that one. And I know for a fact that these printer's marks works because I've got the documents I've created actually printed. But you'll see you'll get incredibly different look to it. I didn't choose separate pages at that point. I would take advice from the printer as to what I needed to include, but you can see it's the same file, but now you've got the bleed, and the bleed is actually that bit there. That marks the start of the bleed at the left-hand side, and that marks the start of the bleed at the top. And all of the fancy little markings are to line that up on a printer. But I've only got one source file, but I've got lots of different outputs I can send it to with very little grief. So that's it for the printout, but what's the last thing that's worth doing? And I haven't taken this as far as I could actually take it, but, you know, let's have a look at it. If that's going to be my contents, I would probably want it a little bit higher. Would I leave that in there? I could do, doesn't really matter. I'm going to put something across the top here. So I want another one of those across the top. But that's only going to be like a welcome. So I only actually need one column. It'll still look like there's two because one's coming through from the master. But that is going to be my table of contents. In fact, we don't really do that anymore, do we? It's got quite attached to Uncle Fester, hasn't it? Right, we'll probably put contents on that. And I do think I closed that, which wasn't the best thing I ever did. Studio text styles. It's saying a heading 3. It would be at least a heading 1, wouldn't it? But actually, it would probably be even bigger than that if it's going to be the heading. And I'd probably use something like couture. And I'd probably make it bigger. And of course, I would have a style for that. So now I've got it there, I would add it down here as my contents heading. And apply it. Right, so at this point, I'm assuming you have taken this as far as you could take it and you have an issue. That's the point to do this, which is you would save it. At that point, and then I think I'd probably do a save as, just to save you from yourself. So we've got our first Mac Bytes newsletter, but now I'm going to make it a template. So I want to put template work in progress. And the reason I'm doing that is, although technically speaking, saving a template will not overwrite the file, if you inadvertently, because who doesn't save, you will overwrite the issue. So what I've done is I've made a completely new copy, and now I can start ripping things out. I'd rip out the content, the stories, so we don't particularly want any of these stories. So all of that can go, leaving you a placeholder for next time, but everything needs to go. You start taking things out. Now, maybe you always have an image at that point. If you do want to say, you know, we always need an image at this point, then use an image placeholder. You don't have to leave an image actually in there as a placeholder. You have this concept of image placeholders, and you can put them wherever you want, like that. So try and get that lined up. So you're doing two things at this point. You are ripping things out, and you are putting things in that are placeholders. So if you think about the graphics down here, maybe it would be a good idea to include those in the template, because the older shows aren't going to change. So there's no point putting them in every time. So that might be something to leave in. And let's say with that one, I would probably have done something really fancy with the back cover. And we've got stuff on there. But basically, you take it as far as you can without getting specific. So obviously this is a problem because it's specific to show 130. But in here, we've got our cover headline, but it's not a style. So I don't really want to delete it until it is a style. So this is the kind of thing you go through, cover headline, before you start ripping things out. So I'm going to take that away, unless you want to just do this, which is put cover headline. You could put that in brackets so you know to remove it. But, you know, don't leave that there, although we've all seen it, haven't we? Now, what I would need to do with this is actually drill down into it a little bit to get rid of these. So on the layers, that's my cover. And there's all kinds of content in my cover there. The masthead, the group, there's all sorts. Let's rip it out so we can actually see it. Right. We definitely don't need the background. I don't know what that bit is, or that. There's the animals. But the masthead, we do actually want. So I'm going to... You've got a couple of things you could do. You could turn them off, or you could actually delete them. But this is the template, so I'm going to delete them. Somewhere in here, I do have my masthead, though. There's my masthead and show number. But I can't see them. And that's because it's white on white. But if I go into my colour, and I just make that a different colour, so we could make it grey so we know it's holding. And then I can edit the number, because next time it's going to be 131. But this is your template, so just put XX in it. And you're good to go. That can now be made into a template. And the thing is, there is actually a template feature now. It's not a case of saving it and then opening it and fiddling around. This is going to be a template. A file and export as template. Now, bizarrely, it does let you put this wherever you want, up to a point. But if you want it available on mobile, it would have to be in iCloud, because it sure doesn't like Google Drive. I'm just going to put it in my Affinity Publisher folder and leave it be. At this stage, it obviously wouldn't be work in progress, and you probably wouldn't even say template unless, you know, it's going to have a different file extension. You're going to know it's a template, and save it. Right, at that point, the file that is open is not the template. This is the work in progress, and that's all it is. So I'm going to save that and close it. Now, when I go to File and New, and I get my dialog box, I want it to appear as a template. So these are presets, no content. Templates, content. But at the moment, there's nothing there, even though I've already created a template. That's because you need to add a folder. So I'm going to click Add a Folder. And this here is my template. It's got an AF template extension. It just happens to be with all my data, but that's where it is. So I'm going to choose it from there. What on earth? Okay, not the best idea. Right, what it's done is it's loaded in every single folder, which I don't particularly need. So I could maybe afford to lose that, crying out loud. But there is my newsletter. So what I would do, now it's in there, I'm going to cancel out of that. And imagine we've gone into Affinity Publisher. We've said File, New. It will show us presets, but we know better. So we go to Templates, and all your template folders will be listed. There is the one template that's in it. Gives you a preview. I can see it's the right one. And then Create. And it takes me back to exactly where I was at the point I created the template, but the big difference is you're not going to overwrite anything because it's called untitled. So it's clever enough to use the template file as just that, a starting point, but create you a completely new file based on it. So we've gone right from the beginning, right through to creating a template. To be honest, should you do a first issue and then create the template? And I would say, if it's the first time you're creating this newsletter, you'll probably make a lot of changes even after you've created the template. And you've got a problem then, haven't you? Because if you were to say new file, that's not the template. But it's not a problem. I'm going to say I don't want to save that, because you can go to File and Open and directly open a template file. And if you decide you want to make some changes to it, you know, that grey's okay, but it would be better if I could see it in black. I always put it on in black. Then do a save, close the template down, you go back in to create another new file, and although the preview hasn't updated, I swear it will when you open it. So from soup to nuts, to be honest, but you will need to make changes to that template as you start working with it. You will add styles to it, things like that. I'd recommend, as you're creating your actual newsletters, have a notepad next to you, or an Evernote page open. Make a list of the changes you make, and then at the end of that session, go back into your template and kind of retrofit them back into the template, just to keep the template up to date, rather than going into the template and having to make 17 changes every time you try and use it. But you've got a newsletter. So put in your questions if you're with us live while I wrap up, and then we'll do a Q&A. Quite happy to do a Q&A. Why aren't you showing me my slides? Oh yes, what I was going to say to you was, if you don't have the time or the inclination, or you don't feel you have the artistic skills, you can actually download templates to work with. I will show you that just after I've done this bit. This one we're looking at is called Newsletter, and it's from Envato Elements, so it's a paid for one, as is this one, which is a corporate newsletter. But you can get plenty of templates completely free online. This one's a full photography magazine template. This one is a travel magazine template. Now, thing is, get them from where? Because while InDesign's been established for over 20 years, Affinity Publisher is just over 1 year old. And that's a bit of an issue when it comes to getting the templates. However, Mike's putting some links in for you now that are both paid and free. But what I will do is, I've lost my Finder window, fabulous. I'm going to actually show you how you go about this, because they're not Affinity Publisher files. If you search for Affinity Publisher templates, you're not going to get too many of them. But what I have got in here, let's bring it on so you can see it, is this one. So these are what I've got. I downloaded them and I unpacked them. So these are the ones from Envato Elements. But what I've got when I actually open them is a help file, and then it says newsletter template. Brilliant, I'll go into that. But you can see I've got two different colours, and they're A4, but they're all InDesign files. Affinity Publisher, not that long ago, about 6 months ago, added the ability to read an InDesign file. But not all InDesign files are made equal. So if I change this a little bit so you can see it, you've got an InDesign file. Extension since inception has been INDD, which is an InDesign 2020 document. But this one is exactly the same content in a different format, which is known as InDesign Markup Language, IDML. And Affinity Publisher can read InDesign Markup Language files. So much so, if I click on this first one and say Open With, I get the two versions of InDesign I have installed. I don't know why it didn't delete the old one either. No wonder I've got no disk space. So I could only open it in there. I could attempt to say other, but trust me, it wouldn't work. But if I click on the InDesign Markup version and right click and say Open With, Affinity Publisher is listed. And all I need to do is to click it, and it will open up straight into Affinity Publisher, including all of the extra pages. So this is when you've taken your templates to extremes. There you go. So that would be a lot of work. If you are happy using that one, then you can just use that template. Obviously, at this point, what's open is an InDesign Markup Language file, but when you go to File and Save, it will instantly prompt you to save it, and when you do save it, it's now a native publisher file. It's that fast and it's that quick. There is literally nothing else to do. There's no hoops to jump through, nothing like that. It's just done. And these things are placeholders that you'll put images in, so that's what crosses in them. So really straightforward to use an InDesign. Don't move. An InDesign file in Affinity Publisher. Now, other Affinity Publisher training. When it came out in beta, which was 2 years ago now, 2 years ago this month, I did a session on it. I think it was 3 hours long. It's longer than this one. It was 3 hours, I think. This one was definitely 3 hours. So there's a good range of training up there. The first one was the beta one. That was the release version on release day. And a couple of months back, I did a dedicated session on working with colour in Affinity Publisher, which was, again, long. But there's a lot to working with colour in Affinity Publisher. All of that colour work could be put in your template. So it might be worth watching that one. In the meanwhile, if you would like to get in touch with me, you can find me at all of those places. And also MacBites. Obviously, I will be on MacBites. But thank you for being with us. If you are with us right now, I'm going to take your questions, so a live Q&A. If you're watching later and you're not interested in the Q&A, thank you very much for being with us, and hopefully I'll see you again. But if you are watching on catch up, I'll leave the Q&A there. But be warned, it's not unusual that we get somewhat off-piste, is it, Mike?
It's not.
It's not. So you might want to say bye-bye now and not suffer the chat. If you do, good night, and I will see you next time. But we're going into the chat. So I'll put the poster up for now, so we've got something to look at other than my desktop, while I take questions. So Mike's put all of those in. You're very welcome, Stephen. You're very welcome. Stephen's saying thank you for my presentation. You are very welcome. So has anybody got any particular questions about that? I could probably have chatted for about 5 hours, because the thing with making a template, which is the ultimate aim, is everything that's inside Affinity Publisher is relevant. You know, text styles, image styles, backgrounds, text layout, you name it. Everything is relevant before you get to the point of making a template. I haven't actually got to the point of making a template with my newsletter yet. I'm still working on styles and getting it perfect. But Kim, how did you enjoy that? Because I know you were saying about your pages. You've been doing page numbers incorrectly. No, you've been doing it differently. You may now be doing them more efficiently. That's what we say, more efficiently. But let me know those questions. Were there any questions that I didn't see?
No.
Text import options. What's this about, Paul? I did import some text. I think I copied and pasted it though, didn't I? Did you test what I suggested for those weird characters that were coming in? I've actually been requested, and it's a bit quirky, this one, but I've been requested. Somebody wanted me to do a dedicated session on typography. So things like baseline grids and different variants of fonts, you name it. You name it. You've imported text files and it mangled it right. Did you set them as I suggested at OS level? When you're bringing in things like that, I have the same issue myself, Paul. It depends on where the text is coming from and how you're passing it through various apps. So I have it in Scrivener. It looks absolutely perfect. I export it and I get a load of hieroglyphics, which is exactly what you're doing. What I did to fix that, I tell you what, it would make more sense visual. I'll stick it in an after hours. What I did was, at OS level, I made sure that the characters were the correct characters before I went any further. So there are, let me show you now. Let's get my desktop up. Let's get rid of everything else off my desktop. That's a good start. Right. Then we'll make sure you can see it. And some of your problem will be to do with replacements. So if I go into the system preferences, helpfully opened up on the wrong screen, and I go to keyboard, you will find in here that you will have some options. And it's these at the bottom down here. Okay, I'm reading questions here. Right. If you use smart quotes and dashes, so if I turn that on, I get weird characters that then have to be translated. But when I turned that off and I typed in a specific character, that was the specific character that got imported, or rather exported, from Scrivener into wherever I wanted it. So that's the first thing to try. That solved my problem. If it is more than that, then there's things that we can do about it. But try that option first. So turn that option off and then create some new text and do the process that you're doing and see if that fixes it. Text was from Ulysses, exported as text. Yeah, but what Ulysses is going to try and do is make it idiot-proof for the receiving application. So if Ulysses didn't convert that to hieroglyphics, what you get in your text won't be the curly quotes. It won't be the smart quotes. It'll be basic quotes. But to be honest, basic quotes is what you want, because if you don't get basic quotes, you get hieroglyphics and code. So try turning off smart quotes anywhere you can. You can turn it on and off in Scrivener. You can turn it on and off at system level. It's one of the first things I do. If I want curly quotes, I'll put curly quotes in. If I don't, then I'm never going to want curly quotes. Trust me, I'm not. Because the problem is I use the text in too many different places. And when I'm using the text in different places, I need it plain vanilla text. Right, so Stephen's saying, I explained the importance of Word documents in a previous lesson containing styles. It was very interesting, but I'm not sure I got it clear. Right, okay. That's probably one of the longer sessions, Stephen. I'm reckoning what I was talking about in that instance was some people have a lot of content either that they've created themselves or that is sent to them in Word format. And whoever has created it, either be you before you came to Affinity Publisher or somebody else, they've taken the time and it's styled. And I think what I was demonstrating was bringing the Word document in and it bringing the styles in with it, and Affinity Publisher interpreting those styles. That was probably what the demonstration was about. But if you've got any specific questions, maybe we could do that as a separate typography bit. Would that go in with typography? Oh, good, Tracy. I'm glad you like that. And brilliant tips. That's good. That's good. Have you got a newsletter that you're actually formatting? I love the way that you can put multiple masters on it. As I say, I'll probably do a session on masters. There's a lot to masters. But the way that they've implemented them, that they can be nested, is stunning. Oh, if I could do that with Keynote. Are you listening, Timmy? I've always said that Keynote would be fantastic if it had layers, which obviously you have in Affinity Publisher. For one thing you could use a layer for, and it might be relevant for Tracy, is when you've got multiple languages going on. If you think about creating a newsletter in multiple languages, how much easier would it be if you could just have a layer for the Spanish and a layer for the English and a layer for the French? And obviously in Affinity Publisher, you can do just that. But Keynote, no, because it doesn't have the concept of layers. It would be amazing to just toggle on a layer and toggle off a layer. It's just not there. I've been screaming for about 13 years about that, but Apple aren't listening. But never give up hope, because I was also screaming for 14 years about having present to a window. And now everybody's locked in at home and everyone's using virtual conferencing. Apple have added it. It's garbage, but they've added it. So you never know. They might think it's irrelevant in a presentation app, but they're forgetting the flexibility that you need within a presentation app now to use it online. So maybe they will add it, but you already have that ability in Affinity Publisher. So if you wanted to have different languages in the same newsletter, so you're using the same layout, you're using the same images, because that would save you a lot of time. If you didn't have that ability, you'd be looking at creating one version of the newsletter in one language and then creating a derivative of it. Problem with that is when an image changes, you potentially have to change it in 12 files if you've got 12 different languages. But the way that I showed how the masters work tonight is just one way of doing it. There is many other ways of doing it, including actually having it nesting at master level. So it can get quite Inception-ish, but mastering masters is probably the number one skill that will save you time. An in-depth on masters would be good. Tracy, I'm going to add it to the list. But I've made an executive decision. We've got 2 sessions, the other sessions that were voted on. We've got those, and then we've got anything that we choose to add. So typography was suggested, and mastering masters is a good title, isn't it? After our holiday, another one of our laughable holidays. Obviously, we're not going anywhere. Haven't been anywhere since, I can't remember. But we're not going anywhere. But we probably will take maybe a day off even. I'm looking at Mike, but he's ignoring me, so never mind. Yeah, so that's a good one. Now, have anybody got any other topics that they think, oh, I wish I knew how that worked? Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it, Deborah. So what did you pick up this time? Always pick up something helpful. You're very welcome, Debbie. I think we've got all the Debs in, haven't we? Oh, we're all the Debs in. Full complement of Debs. Excellent. Right, so has anybody got any more questions before we wrap up and fix the mess that YouTube created earlier? That's going to be a good one, isn't it, Mike? I don't know how I'm going to do that. Yes, I pressed the right button. YouTube took me to the wrong place and I went live. That's why you weren't there. Well, it's why I wasn't there. So I need to go and fix that unholy mess, which I need to fix for tomorrow. I'm just thinking of how many places we've got that link.
Yeah, I've already looked.
Have you come up with a definitive list? We must look at this as an opportunity to come up with a definitive list, Mike. Right. All of the mails are going to need redoing and everything's going to need redoing. So I'm going to head off and cry first while I have a look at that and make 100% sure that that never, ever happens again. You're very welcome, Andreas.
I'll get the ice creams.
I would. In fact, you might want to bring the freezer up. Now, I didn't catch much of the chat at the beginning, so I'm heading back to the beginning now. Now, many of these people may already have gone, but if not, I am looking and I am reading. So I'm going to catch up with all of the chat afterwards. And like I've said, if you want to get in touch with me with any particular questions or anything else, just let me know. Let me know. And we will be back tomorrow. Oh, hello, Curtis. Curtis said hello earlier. Hello, Curtis. We will be back tomorrow night with an After Hours. In After Hours, we are doing Devon Think. Always assuming I can get that working with iCloud. Luckily, works with Dropbox, so we might have a backup of that. But we're looking at Devon Think, and you're looking at Microsoft Lists, aren't you? Yeah. And what else was I doing? Oh, PowerPoint. Doing some PowerPoint tomorrow as well. So, thank you for being with us. If you've got no more questions, last call for questions, we will head off and try and fix the mess that YouTube have just created. I'm smiling, but it's through gritted teeth. YouTube. Really? Really? It did, and I don't think there's much I can do about that, but I'm about to find out if there is something I can do about it. But for the moment, I'm going to say goodnight to you all. Thank you very much for being with us. I hope you've enjoyed it, and as I say, if you do have any questions, just ping me. But for the moment, it's good night from me.
It's good night from me.
And we'll both see you next time.